Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I'm going to be doing my December wrap up. So today I'll be talking about all the books that I read in December and what I thought about them, what rating I gave them, all that fun stuff. So in December, that was my very last month, thank goodness, of doing theme TBRs. Although this particular theme was rather loosely based, I called it wrap up. So I basically just read the books that either I had meant to get to over the year of 2019 or maybe just wrapping up some series that I hadn't finished yet that I really wanted to finish. And I did just that. I did lots of kind of wrapping up and finishing some series and reading some books that I intended to read in other months throughout the year. So I'm going to be referencing some notes like I normally do just to make sure I keep on track and I remember what I wanted to say about each book, because sometimes after I read several books in a row, I tend to forget some of the thoughts that I have. So I write them down just so I can keep track of what I need to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the first book that I read, I borrowed from my sweet friend Jamie. Thank you so much, Jamie, for letting me borrow it. And that was Five Dark Fates, and that is the fourth book in the Three Dark Crown series by Kendare Blake. If you've never heard of the Three Dark Crown series before, it's a very dark, royal fantasy book that's about this island where every generation, three triplet girls are born and they are destined to become queen. The only thing is one of them is destined to become queen. When they hit a certain age, they all have to fight each other to the death to get the throne. So the last one standing is the one to get the throne. That's some family issues right there, if there are any. So with Five Dark Fates, again, this was the last book in the series, so I'm not going to delve too much into the story because I don't want to do any spoilers or anything, especially if you've never read any of the series before. But I really enjoyed this last book, thank goodness. I was glad that my enjoyment was pulled up after this last book, because to be honest, the third book in the series was probably my least favorite. I didn't like a lot of the direction the story was going in the third book, and I was really hopeful that the fourth book would kind of pull it back up for me and just be more enjoyable, and it was. I'm so glad it was. It felt like there was way more focus on the sisters, which I enjoyed compared to the third book. In the third book, there was a lot of focus, I felt like, just in different characters and different portions of the story, just there's some new directions it was going, and there wasn't as much focus on the sisters, which is honestly my favorite thing about the series. I really enjoyed focusing on the sisters and their lives and how they were brought up differently and their personalities and all of that. So I was really excited to see that the fourth book pulled that back. It brought it back to the sisters and getting to see more of their thoughts and just who they are, and I just had a lot more fun with it because it was a lot more focused on them. There was some seriously high stakes in the story for a super awesome final confrontation. The entire series is building up to this certain point, and it's so nice to finally get there and to just feel the amount of high stakes. You just feel kind of like this dread but excitement, and you want to get there. And so I was excited to be able to kind of get to that point and to kind of feel that drive to it, and it didn't feel so dry like it did in the third book, to be honest. There was a very satisfying ending to a dark fantasy series. So all in all, I am glad I read it. I was pleasantly surprised with it because, to be perfectly honest, I kind of put myself out on a limb when I read Three Dark Crowns because I didn't think I would like it, to be perfectly honest. And I tried it and I really enjoyed it. It actually ended up being one of my top books of 2019. So I really enjoyed the series. It was worth a read. So if you're interested in maybe some dark fantasy, maybe a little bit slight Hunger Games vibes of just siblings trying to murder each other, then go for it. It's a lot of fun. So I would definitely recommend the series, and I gave Five Dark Fates 4 stars out of 5. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it was a great series, and I had a lot of fun finishing it up. The next book that I got to is one that I was nervous to read because I knew it was going to be intense and was going to be more intense than I normally was used to, and that was Sadie by Courtney Summers. This book follows this girl whose sister has been murdered, and Sadie is the girl that we follow here, and she's pretty sure she knows who murdered her sister, and she's hunting down that person, trying to see if she can seek justice. And basically she's going out to murder the person that murdered her sister. What's interesting about this story, though, is the fact that it's told in a couple different formats. It kind of bounces back and forth between hearing Sadie's story through her thoughts and for what's happening, and also through a podcast form. So there's this particular podcast that becomes interested in Sadie's case, because the thing is Sadie, when she goes to find her sister's killer. Sadie goes missing. People don't know where she went. They don't know that she's really gone to look for her sister's killer. They don't know what's happened to her, and she's just gone missing. And so there's this person, this podcast is following it as a story, and he ends up being a step behind Sadie the whole way. But it's an interesting way of reading it. The podcast portions and chapters are read just like that. They're read kind of an interview style, and it just kind of gives it a different vibe. I have heard that the audiobook for this is amazing because I've heard it's like listening to a podcast, and it's very well done. I think it's supposed to be like a full cast. So hopefully in the future, I would love to be able to listen to the actual audiobook and just get to experience it in a different way. I have to admit, I really, really struggled reading this one because this was so different than anything that I've read. This was dark. There's a lot of trigger warnings in it, especially for abuse and child abuse. And that's a hard topic. That's not something I'm used to reading, and I knew it was going to be hard hitting. And because of that, and I'm not used to reading that, I had a hard time just reading this one and honestly, like going through my thoughts and figuring out what on earth I thought about it. Like I said, I just don't read books like this with heavy topics. The plot was gripping and the topics were difficult, and it was such a strong story. So it was just power hitting. That's not the right thing I want to say. I'm struggling with words today, so I apologize if I'm tripping over my words. But it was just powerful and heavy hitting story. I did struggle personally with the podcast chapters. So again, I think if I were to have listened to the audiobook, I may have felt differently. But the podcast chapters I ended up struggling with because of the way that it's written, and it's got this interview style. A lot of times if you watch the news or maybe even do listen to podcasts or things like that, sometimes it'll have someone saying a quote, and after they say it, they're like, and that was this person who said this. And when I'm reading that, it's confusing. And to be honest, because of the fact in this podcast form, we're following this person who is trying to find out what happened to Sadie. And so we're actually a step behind Sadie. So it switches back and forth between the podcast and Sadie. And with Sadie, that's what's happening. We know what's going on. We know where she is. We know what's happened in her life and what path she is taking. And in the podcast, we take a step back following someone who's trying to figure out where Sadie is. But we know. So it's hard because it feels like it slows down too much, because it feels so fast-paced when you're reading Sadie's portion of the story. We're in her mind. We're in her thoughts of what she's thinking, what she's going through, what she's pursuing. And then we all of a sudden shift to someone who's outside of it all. And it gets frustrating for me, at least for me, because I wanted to just stay with Sadie and just keep track of where she was. So I honestly struggled with that. Now, if I listened to the audiobook, I may have enjoyed the podcast portion way more, because I think it would probably be easier to listen to and more enjoyable to listen to than it would be to read. Don't get me wrong, though. I still really enjoyed reading this. I just struggled with the podcast style chapters. I often wanted to just stick with Sadie's chapters and everything. Not to be spoilery. I'm trying my best to say this in the most just abstract way possible, but I struggled with the ending of this book. To me, it felt open-ended to the point where I just wanted more. I felt like I wanted more at the end, and I'm not used to that with the books that I read. Most books that I read, unless it's like within a series and it's going to the next book, it has a nice wrap up to it. You know what I mean? It's got a nice just finish to it. I'm so sorry. I gotta grab my tea. I'm about to cough. Pardon. Delicious green tea. So what was I saying? Oh my goodness, my brain. Oh yes, the ending. The ending just felt too overhanging. I just wanted more. And certain things just weren't wrapped up. I'm not used to that. I'm used to things being in a nice little package at the end of a story. If it's supposed to be the end of a series or a book, it's just like a one-off like this one is. I expect and hope that it wraps up enough to where I feel satisfied. I did not feel satisfied at the end of this. And that made it even harder for me to rate it, because not only was it just the topics in this book were something I'm not used to, but the way it ended was something I wasn't used to. It just didn't feel as much of a conclusion as I wanted. So that was hard. But All in all, I gave this book 4.25 out of 5 stars. I know that sounds super weird specific, but I'm telling you, I struggled with this. I apologize. Sorry. I've got like a tickle in my throat and I really don't want to stop this video because I don't do editing, so sorry. You just have to deal with my coughing and my gunk. So anyways, that was Sadie. I enjoyed it. It was heavy. I recommend it, but definite trigger warnings and everything. So it was pretty crazy. Again, I am so sorry. My goodness. I try not to cough at the camera or anything, and I'm not sick. I don't know. I haven't coughed all day. All right, let's move on. I have three more books to go over here, and the next one was a wrap-up of a series for me, and that was Supernova by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book in the Renegade series. I have talked about the Renegade series so much on this channel, so I apologize if this is like a broken record to you, but Renegades is all about this age-old story of villains and superheroes fighting against each other and trying to one-up each other, and this is all about people with superpowers. And one of the things I love so much about the Renegade series is it really delves into the idea of what if a certain group of people are given too much power. For example, what if the superheroes have too much power? Are they going to always pick the best, most heroic choices, or are they going to get a little bit power hungry? That's what a lot of this series focuses on and follows, and that's so cool because a lot of times it's like the heroes are heroes and the villains are villains, and this one it blurs the lines so much. And then this story we follow 2 characters, we kind of hop back and forth between their plot lines, and one of them is a villain, one of them is a hero. And it's just so interesting to see both sides and just to see what their thought process is when it comes to what they think is right. It's a really cool concept. So this is the last book in the series. I was so excited to read this, but so nervous to read this at the same time because I didn't want it to end, and I was afraid about what Marissa Meyer was going to do to my wonderful characters that I love so much. I really enjoy jumping back into this world again. There's super high stakes in this story. Very strong blurred lines of heroes and villains, just very much strongly blurred of, are the heroes actually heroes and are the villains actually villains, and who's right and who's wrong. The lines were blurred more than anything in this one, and it was just juicy, and I loved it. Saw a lot of great growth in Nova's character. Nova's one of the main characters that we follow, and she's kind of the villainous character that we follow, I guess I could say. And I loved seeing the growth in her character throughout this entire series. She grew so much from page 1 all the way to the end of this series. And it was so wonderful to see that. I love seeing some good character growth. It had a highly climactic conclusion to this series. It just took it over the edge, y'all, and it was awesome, and I loved it, and this is honestly one of my favorite series of all time. I will always recommend this series because I think it's a perfect series for readers and non-readers. This is a great series to jump into if you aren't much of a reader because it is fast-paced. It's just like reading a Marvel movie. It's just amazing. I also, not to be spoilery because I'm going to try not to be, but oh my goodness, the epilogue in this book destroyed my life. I got to the epilogue, read it, and went, no, it can't be over. No, please, no. And I was like, there's got to be more. But that's the end of the book. And oh my goodness, the epilogue was so intensely crazy. It just, I don't know, a bomb dropped, basically. It was just like dropping a bomb. And I don't know why Marissa Meyer decided to drop a bomb in the epilogue when the freaking series is over. So thanks, Marissa Meyer, for that one. I still love the series, though, but oh my goodness. It was nuts. So, all in all, loved the series, gave it 5 stars. I've given every single book in the series 5 stars. Renegades, Arch Enemies, and Supernova, all 5 stars. All so good. Please read it if you haven't. If you haven't read Renegades, just try it out, please. It's just so good. Okay, I think my coughing fit's done. Thank goodness. All right. Let's move on. We got 2 more to go. So, the reason that I read these next 2 books I'm going to show you is because I was really close to reaching 70 books for the year 2019, and I wanted to hit it because I set a goal of 50 books and I was getting close to 70, which is nuts. And I was like, I'm going to reach that goal. I'm going to hit 70 books. That's what I'm going to do. So what do you do when you don't have much time left to read, but you want to hit a certain goal. You either go for shorter books or you go for some graphic novels, which count, by the way. They count. Some people are like, oh, graphic novels don't count. They count. They're books with awesome stories. They count. So I read 2 graphic novels that I borrowed from my sweet husband. And I am excited to show these to you because if you've never heard of these people before, then you need to get on this. So I read the first Adventure Zone graphic novel, Here There Be Gerblins, and there's a lot of names on here. So let me describe what this is. So if you've never heard of the Adventure Zone before, it is actually a podcast. It's a podcast of a group of guys who play Dungeons and Dragons, but they're really good at it. They're really good at it in that they're really into it. They really commit to their characters, but they're so funny. They are absolutely hilarious. So if you've never heard about the Adventure Zone before and you need to find another podcast to listen to, I recommend it. And I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons person. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. My husband does, which is how I got into this podcast. But it is so much fun to listen to. Now, the person that created these graphic novels, they loved the Adventure Zone as well. And because of that, they thought, hey, this would make a really, really great graphic novel because these guys are great storytellers. So that's just what he did. He decided to make a graphic novel out of this podcast. So the entire podcast follows one overarching story. And it's like several episodes long. I mean, it is long. So it's broken up into kind of these different chapters here when it comes to the graphic novels. But this one here is sort of the beginning of their quest. I can't really say too much about it because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's really fun to see the podcast story written in this kind of form. Personally, I did not enjoy reading this as much as I like listening to it. I feel like you definitely need to listen to the podcast before you read this because it's more enjoyable that way. I will definitely say that. It's way more enjoyable if you've listened to the podcast. And I enjoyed, at least for this particular first one, I enjoyed listening to it more than reading it. That is not the case with the other one though. So, and we'll get to that. I love the art style in it. It was so much fun. I don't have a whole lot to say about this because I don't read that many graphic novels, so I'm not able to like really pick it apart and be like, I don't know, have more opinions on it. It was just fun. It was a good time. It was a quick read. And I had a blast reading it and getting to kind of just re-experience all these funny stories all over again. So it's a good time. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Again, really enjoyed it. Not as much as the podcast, but I still really enjoyed it a lot. After all that, let's get to the next one. I don't have to explain anything else because this is the second one in this series. These are the only 2 that are out right now. There's a third one coming out as well. This is the Adventure Zone, Murder on the Rockport Limited. This one I was most excited about reading because within the amount of podcast episodes I've listened to of the Adventure Zone, this was my favorite story arc. It's like this murder mystery that takes place on a train. It's good times. And this one was really, really fun. This is my favorite story arc in the podcast, so this was really enjoyable for me to read this. It was fast-paced, funny, and has a fun art style, and I loved it. So this one was a blast to read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I highly recommend these. They're fun times. If you're a graphic novel person, go for it. If you've listened to the Adventure Zone or you're into D&D, you will love this. It is great. Okay. After that sloppy mess of a video, my apologies, from coughing in your face to drinking tea to probably really, really botching some descriptions of books. You're welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Have you read any of the books that I have mentioned? Please let me know what you think of them down below. Or also let me know what you read in December. I would love to hear what you read and maybe just get some good suggestions from you all. I always love to have some good suggestions of books. But on this side of the screen over here is my logo. If you click on that, click on it now, you can subscribe to my channel and follow me on my book journey. On this side of the screen over here is my not my logo, is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch another one right now. This video is such a mess. Thank you so much for watching. You rock. Don't forget to keep reading. And there's my dog. Bye.